Well, first of all, hello everyone. Welcome to this panel. Some of you are here because you know of me from YouTube, social media stuff. Potentially, some of you are here just because you thought the topic sounded interesting. Just out of my own curiosity, before we get started, how many people are here that don't know who I am and are just here because the topic is interesting? All right, great, great. That's delightful, honestly. I kind of am most looking forward to that. So I will give just the quickest, briefest summary of myself, just in case to give you a little bit of background. Uh, my name is Robert. Go by Sinix online. I am a YouTuber, weirdly enough. I've been doing it for 15 years. Yes, YouTube has been around for that long. I started at the start. So I've been doing it for a very long time. But regardless of that, my history in the art world is also very bumpy. It has a lot of ups and downs. I got into art in my 20s. Didn't do it before then, so it was kind of like a post adults kind of like I don't know what to do to make money. Maybe I'll do art, which is that's not a great idea. But it seemed like something that I don't know would be fun, so I got really into it. I started just kind of realizing that there were so many puzzles to be solved in just art itself, understanding color, understanding form, understanding everything. I realized it was just a big box of puzzles to kind of mess around with. And for myself, for my own history, I'll just say it. I'm a slightly autistic background, especially when I was a little kid. Weirdly enough, I've kind of adapted and grown out of it. The mask I would put on is now like just my reality. But nonetheless, I'm just obsessive about just solving puzzles, figuring things out to the best I can. So art was great for that because I got into it. I started realizing, oh, I can really dive into just even color theory. I can dive into all these different fundamentals of everything, and there's so many puzzles to solve. I was just happy enjoying that. But while I was doing that, I was, getting better, leveling up, doing all that stuff, being parts of community. And before I knew it, I was at a level that some would say was, entry level professional, kind of great. And I started to get job offers. And initially, I took any job offer because I didn't know what to do with this love for these puzzles. I was like, okay, maybe I can, just work in the industry, do a little bit of that. I tried it. Not for me. Didn't I realized that like solving someone else's puzzle box wasn't as fun as solving my own little like box of puzzles and things that I found interesting. So I tried it for a while, and then it really confused me because I was like, oh, I thought this was the end goal. I thought industry, I'm getting better to work in the industry. Like that was supposed to be the point. I think it seemed like it was everyone else's point. So I just kept, at it. But then I realized, oh, no, I don't like this. This doesn't feel like the thing. It feels like suddenly, solving the puzzles wasn't the fun part. It was just having finished puzzles. It was the products that started to matter more than the actual process of making art. And that's where you get into a lot of like famous quotes, like it took me forever to learn to paint like a child, all that type of stuff. And that, in my opinion, really gets back to the idea of like we do get into a mental space where art becomes about finished products. It just becomes about the what do I have at the end of it, and it stops being as much about the fun of doing it, the exploration, the joy of it, everything like that. So personally, when I realized that the career or the trajectory I was on had taken me to a spot where the product was the only thing that mattered, it really threw me for a loop. I stopped doing art for a couple years in my late 20s, and I was just like, I don't know, maybe it wasn't for me. But while away from it, I realized, but there was something I loved so much. What was that thing? What did I love so much? Why did I get so invested in it? And that's when I realized, oh, it was because I was just enjoying the puzzles of it. The actual getting better was more important than where I got to, where, finding an end goal wasn't really what was motivating me. It was just the actual journey of it itself. So obviously, if you find yourself in that position, Teaching is amazing. Teaching is the place. That's the place to enjoy, just kind of interacting with that stuff, interacting with the puzzles of art. So I'm just throwing that out there just at the start because a lot of you might feel like you're going toward a career path or you have a goal in mind. And sometimes it won't quite line up for the reasons you thought, you got into art. So just bear in mind, there are so many different ways to make a living with art. You can do education. You can work in the industry. There's nothing wrong with enjoying, products and having finished things and being like, yes, I made this thing. It's finished. Let's all enjoy it now. I just didn't, personally have that feeling when I saw stuff I had finished. It was like, whatever, it's done. It's not interesting to me anymore because it's done. I don't have anything to do on it. So there's so many different ways. You can do art for yourself. You can make a great living in many, many different ways, conventions and even just private social media, Patreon, all that kind of weird stuff. YouTube content of all types. You can even just do art drama. It doesn't matter. Just whatever you want. There's so many ways to make a living with it. But it is always worth, taking a moment to analyze what it is about art that, got you into it and that you love about it. Because you do sometimes get kind of a little bit tricked into thinking or kind of letting other people's dreams bleed over into your own dreams and forgetting that, no, it's okay to have your own kind of goals for what you want out of it. Doesn't have to be the same as everyone else's. So, yeah, just want to mention that. I was mentioning this. I have so many notes that I made in preparation for today, and it's kind of ridiculous because I just started kind of typing out thoughts, and before I knew it, it was like a lot, and I'm gonna try to manage my time. I'm doing a bad job already because I'm like 10 minutes in, and we haven't really got to anything. But nonetheless, gonna do my best. So anyway, I love the phrase art journey and that we all refer to art as a journey because, the only reason you'll refer to anything as a journey is because that aspect of it is more important than any end goal. If it was about an end goal, we wouldn't call it a journey. We wouldn't be focused on the journey, the art journey, all of that aspects of it. There is no real end point where you're like, I made it. Now I stopped doing art. No, it's a never ending journey. And in that journey, I spent a lot of time, kind of uncovering any rocks, any things along that pathway. I spent the time with all the fundamentals and I kind of, feel like I exhausted certain obvious avenues for understanding things, perspective, anatomy, color, and things. Not that I've mastered them, but I feel like, I've at least, I understand, where they could go if I kept doing them. So I started to get a little bit more into, thinking about, okay, what are the other rocks that I'm leaving unturned in this little state? Because, when you think about it and you describe it to anyone, art is not something that's like coming out of just, working out a muscle, getting something physically, different about you. It's all just leveling up your observational skills, kind of storing tons of information into your subconscious, grinding through, different fundamentals, just studying stuff. But a lot of that information is just kind of, it's drifting off somewhere into your brain. And, that makes art a very complicated thing, more so than a lot of other activities to talk about. And this is what led me to start really getting into, okay, well, maybe there's other ways to improve at art that aren't just related to the most obvious fundamentals. So if you've watched my YouTube stuff, I started kind of dabbling around with things like, drawing with energy, talking about things that seemed like more about tempo and speed and kind of finding, a real kind of rhythmic nature to how you even go about drawing. And all of that stems from an idea that I had very much noticed when I was drawing good versus when I was drawing bad. And that's like, you can kind of lull yourself into, what we call the flow state. But basically, you can lull yourself into a state where you're kind of a little bit more trusting of your subconscious. You're not hyper analyzing everything as you're doing it. You're kind of just like engaging with this vast amount of knowledge that you have in your subconscious. And I once again I dabbled with it, talking about, well, I know that if you draw with certain tempos and you kind of focus on the speed at which you're even doing them, and trying to be a little bit more rhythmic and having some musicality in the way you draw, it kind of dulls your consciousness just a little bit. So you are a little bit of that subconscious stuff starts to come through, and the results usually get a lot better. Now everyone gets that, through mileage, regardless of anything. If you draw enough, you're going to kind of get a better sense of, not having to concentrate on it as actively, in the long term. But I kind of wanted to see. I wanted to, once again, I'm curious. I'm like, can we make that an active thing to practice? Can we actually, outside of simply saying, yeah, infinite mileage equals infinite, closer and closer to just more trust in your subconscious, less, chaos happening in your brain and everything like that? Is there a way to make that a thing we can practice? So once again, that's where the tempo stuff came out of, because it was like, yes, you can practice, at least being conscious of things like the speed you draw at and getting a lot of value out of that. You can also practice things like being aware of, like, the time of day you might be drawing at, and your adrenaline levels, and like your level of focus. You work better with music, without music, all that type of stuff. I started to get obsessed with that type of stuff and really looking for just, anything that I feel like, oh, okay, this actually does make a bit of sense. And the more I started going into it, the more I started realizing, no, there's a lot of sense that's actually being made in this kind of abstracter side of the fundamentals, of how, just we can deal with consciousness and subconscious thoughts and everything. So yeah, and this also comes from a place of just blind optimism. I have a lot of optimism in the sense that I believe that everyone can basically be a master, amazing tier artist. And that's, for some people, the ones that usually do make it are the ones that just had a little bit more inherent confidence. We call that talent. I call it inherent confidence. It means when you were a little baby and you doodled something around, someone said, like, great, good job. And versus saying, like, don't do that, don't mess with that. And something like that, that some little aspect of your background gave you a little hint of confidence in drawing. And once again, drawing is not a physical skill that you're like, you're not working out. It is a very much a mental belief. It's an expectation every time you go about doing something. So, I just wanted to mess with that. But anyway, the idea that I was playing with, and mostly, was just that, like, I think I can get people to kind of hopefully get a little bit past that. Maybe, maybe they didn't have a childhood where they were encouraged. Maybe their inherent confidence isn't as high as other people. Can you still make up for that? And I just simply believe, yes, you can. Through some means, yes, you can. That is my optimism. That is the optimism that springs forth all of my chaos and nonsense that I like to talk about. But anyway, there's going to be two main topics that I want to talk about during this panel. One is just going to be dealing with the role of your mental state while you're actively drawing. And I mean, like, actively, like while you're putting down lines, while you're trying to draw, a cat, a person, or whatever. Your kind of mental state during that. And then if hopefully there's enough time, I will talk about a little bit just about maintaining overall just good, positive, outlooks on just when you're not drawing, but on your art career, on your art journey, on everything like that, because that's extremely important. You have to have the expectation when you're not drawing that you're still, not getting worse at art by not drawing, or things like that. Because a lot of people think that. They think, I didn't draw today, I got worse at art, or something like that. That is not true. That is not how it works. You can convince your brain that even, you're just going to get better every day, regardless of what you do. I convinced my brain of that because I think there is a logical through line to just understand that every day you experience more of the world, you observe new things. There's nothing about you that is making you gonna get worse at art. If anything, your visual library has grown, you've gained new experiences. You will be a better artist when you go and draw again, the next day, or whenever it happens. Maybe it's a month away, who knows. You will be a better artist then. If you believe that, it will be true because once again, just the nature of things, it's mostly expectation. And I know it's difficult to find that, but that's we'll deal with a little bit. Get into that. Okay. So obviously those two topics, they're both just related to consciousness, conscious thought, a concept that weirdly enough is kind of not talked about much, and especially in Western cultures and stuff. There are a lot of Eastern cultures, Indian cultures, things like that. They make consciousness more of a thing that is meant to be, talked about, explored, kind of people put a lot of more thought into it. But we kind of grow up in a place where consciousness and conscious thought, we kind of treat it in a very, spiritualistic way, not to, say that in a bad way, but we make it feel like something that is a little more, not for everyone, not like, just approachable by every single person. But consciousness is something we should all be thinking about, even in the most secular ways. We can enjoy thinking about consciousness, really just, states of being a lot more. As we go forward into this, I'll skip through some of my little notes here. But yeah, the other thing that I've just always been obsessive about, and this will help me lead into some of the stuff I'm going to talk about, is just design theory and really aesthetics as a concept, the philosophy of aesthetics. What does it mean to have something that looks good? What does it mean to have something that looks good? What does it mean for something to be pleasant to look at, and all that type of stuff? The idea of aesthetics, and I find that idea very interesting as well. It's once again a huge puzzle, a huge giant puzzle with many, many subsections and many things to talk about. But I got obsessed with that topic, and has kind of led me into, a couple different places. Because, my core realization is that aesthetics, more than anything, are based on comfort and kind of structure, kind of order, but not in a very direct way. Because a lot of design theory ideas, they deal with order and comfort, but in a very kind of, roundabout way where it's actually trying to give comfort to people's subconscious when they look at things. And that's where a lot of like composition theory comes from, a lot of theory of even just storytelling moods and all that stuff. It has a lot to do with just ratios, hierarchies, different like levels of order between color and light and all these types of things. But at the end of the day, even if the mood of a painting might be, uncomfortable, maybe the content of it is, on a deeper level, the execution of it, the subconscious read of it, if it's good, will always filter back to being comfortable for the viewer. And a lot of times that comfort comes from simple understanding and not being, confused by little things. So that's where ideas like big, medium, small, and, hierarchies of shapes and sizes really, just become hyper important. I mention that so often when I'm giving little portfolio feedbacks and stuff. I'm like, you can push your, the sizes to have like areas of rest, areas of density, all these different ratio-based things. And the only reason for all of that is because there's a universal appeal to the subconscious when things feel like they're done with a slight sense of structure. There's no ambiguity of like, is this the primary focal point? Should I be looking over here? Should I be looking over here? Things are split too evenly, like 50% of the paintings in light, 50% in shadow. We don't like that level of like, I don't know if it's mostly shadow or mostly light. We like to have a very clear sense of things. That's where you get things like the golden ratio, the golden rule, because in many ways, that the golden ratio represents the, the scale difference between two things for them to be very obviously apparent that one is smaller than the other, but not so far away as to where they feel unrelated. There's like that critical moment of just like, yes, they're in order, they're related, and all of that kind of stuff. And that's why, all that design theory. Sorry, I could easily ramble about just design theory and aesthetic stuff easily. But I won't, because I want to get into the other stuff. But nonetheless, all of that stuff comes into mind, and I'm just gonna read some of my notes so I can get back on track and not ramble as much. Um, okay, so yeah, one of the other ideas that obviously it sounds like relates to all the tempo stuff is just our struggle to interact with all the knowledge that's in our brain, because we all have a lot of knowledge. In fact, we all have perfect aesthetic sense in our brain. We all have a very clear idea of what looks good and what doesn't. We know that order and different structures appeal to us in very, just instinctual ways. There's no like mystery to aesthetics. The design theory stuff I'm talking about is our attempt to understand what already exists inside it. It's not trying to project like, oh, if I let's try to make everyone like this. There's nothing of that. It's everyone likes something. Let's try to figure out why they like it. There's a universality to aesthetics. Now, you might think, oh, there's different style choices. Certainly, there's places where they vary, but on a core level, there's just such a strong universality to all of that stuff. But anyway, so the big thing is that we have all that information. We're born kind of with a sense of things. And if you know what looks good, you can identify art you like. You can identify if something looks like a horse or doesn't look like a horse, if something looks like a well-drawn horse or a horribly drawn horse. So if you know that, if that idea, if that information exists inside of your brain, then how is it possible that we can't draw a beautiful horse every time? It's not like you don't know what it is to be a good-looking horse. I don't know why I'm talking about horses, but nonetheless, that started to really kind of drive me down the path of like, okay, how can we interact a little bit more with that? Once again, that was where the tempo stuff came from, and all of that stuff. But a little bit more recently, I would say, certainly during the pandemic, I started to experiment around with little bits of deeper thought, little bits of meditative stuff, and really just exploring any avenue I could. But I'll just, once again, it's so easy to fly off the rails. But let me get back to little notes here. So this will be a lot better once I start reading. Okay. So, I'll skip this part. Never mind. There's a whole part about how limitation is the mother of creativity. Very standard stuff, but nonetheless important stuff. So let's keep going about there. Yeah, that's like, okay. You know what? No, I'll just start picking up my notes. Okay. So yeah, limitation leads to creativity, but perhaps a deeper understanding might make us realize that limitation, it leads to a sense of focus. It leads to a sense of, kind of driving our brain in specific direct, paths. The overwhelming vastness, once again, of your subconscious, one of the ways you can kind of get a little bit in there is with a little bit of limitation. That's why limitation is such a strong thing for creativity. I mean, for instance, I could easily say, hey, let's all, design a wizard. Or let's just think of a wizard. Just think of a wizard and try to make it fun and interesting and unique. That's going to be very, very difficult. You're probably going to just see a guy with a robe and a hat and like, oh, that's a long beard. It's a wizard. I don't know. And then you'll be like, I don't know how to make it interesting. But if you start throwing modifiers in, like, oh, he's the sunflower wizard and he only comes out at night and he's like, he's 10 feet tall, whatever. You can start even just saying sunflower wizard probably just like lit up some little deeper part into your subconscious where maybe you had an idea. Oh, the hat can be like a sunflower. Maybe the clothes are like, maybe he's got a little sunflower one. Like suddenly you're able to engage and make something that's maybe a lot more unique than you would have thought of if you would have just said, yeah, I'm just going to design a wizard. Limitation is so powerful at just getting us even just a little bit into the deeper wells of our subconscious, because we couldn't, think about how hard it would be to think of those things without that little bit of limitation on what the prompt, what the idea was. It was, it can just be so ridiculously difficult. So Anyway, so uh, every time I go off track, I lose my little note and placement. Um, okay, so my latest thing is just obviously just that. Okay, we know that limitation leads to a lot more mental depth. So what other ways? How can I interact with more of this? Because I know it's in there. I know everything's in there. I know the things are in the subconscious. How can I get them out? Um, so let's see. When I talk about this, experiencing more of that depth, trying to experience that depth, obviously it's basically what we would refer to as a flow state or being in the zone when you're drawing. And you can get there. You can get into places where you're interacting with a little bit more of your subconscious. But the word flow state sounds very kind of abstract. Like when people say it, you're kind of like, oh, it sounds kind of cool and fun, and like it's just kind of relaxing, and it is. But I feel like a better way to refer to it would just be reaching states of deeper trust in your subconscious. Just trying to reach a little bit of trust that you don't have to be actively, controlling every line you're putting down, and there is a lot of value and just kind of trusting your subconscious that it will make good decisions as you go through it and everything. Oh, it's 4:30. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna speed this up. Never mind. Never mind. Okay. So this is not a talk I've done before, by the way. This is all like just like I wanted to give a talk on it, but it's all developing. It's developing ideas, which is why it's well, I'll have to figure out what the fat to trim and what to go with. But there is a little bit of that. Um, okay, so obviously, by drawing often, already mentioned, the more you draw, you'll develop trust. You'll develop an easier pathway to getting into flow states, to just making better progress into your subconscious and everything. But maybe it's good to start talking about defining these things a little bit more, especially consciousness. Once again, we don't talk about it enough in Western culture. So. Um, I personally I view consciousness as a sense, the same as your sense of taste, your sense of smell. It's to me, it's the greatest, just tragedy, travesty, the most horrible thing that we basically grew up thinking. Oh, we got five senses. We got the taste, the smell, and everything. Because there's obviously that one remaining one, which is our insight, our consciousness, our ability to even notice and focus on our thoughts and doing something. That is very much a sense that we have. It can be dulled. We can, obviously if you're tired, if you've been drinking, there's a lot of ways to dull these senses. There's even ways to make them more hyper, just, focused on them, like every sense, like any sense you have. But they are senses. Now this it's complicated because this sense is kind of an overarching sense. It's a sense that still like plays a little part in even all of the other senses, your sense of touch and everything like that. But nonetheless, I really like to view it as a sense. In many ways, yeah, it does feel like the master sense, the concept that the other senses are dictated by. So I'm gonna just get into reading so I can go faster because I'm worried now that it's 4:30. So it's hard to have a great analogy for something so intrinsic to our very being as, sense and everything, and consciousness. But I like to think of consciousness also kind of like sound weird and nonsensical, like a four-dimensional little pinhole that displays, some of the stuff happening in different parts of our brain. But I really do see it like a little pinhole because once again, we're not engaging with most of the stuff in our brain. Even most of our senses, our sense of touch is very much just not focused on by our consciousness most of the time. All of our sense of hearing, even it gets everything, that little pinhole of consciousness. It's just very interesting to think about. It's just that little sliver that gives us, a little awareness of our bodily experience. So you can move that sliver around, obviously. You can think about, your sense of touch. You can think more closely on your sense of hearing. You can think more closely on some, just different, even your thoughts. You can think more closely on them. You can move that little pinhole around and kind of like observe a lot of the things that are happening. And, this is what led me to the meditative stuff because it really, practicing moving that pen and just kind of, feeling like it's more of something that you have a little bit of, say over, a little bit of control over is extremely, extremely valuable. Um, so I'm trying to see what I can skip, but yeah. Um, well, I keep saying I'll just read and then I get distracted. Okay, I'm gonna read from now on. uh, so that little spot, that little sliver, I also can view it like a little spotlight, which it might feel like to you, whatever way you like visualizing things. But consciousness is kind of like a little spotlight that we get to move around and focus on different things, focus on senses, focus on thoughts, all that type of stuff. So, you know, okay. Regardless, you are much more than your consciousness, obviously, which is a weird concept as well. To remember that you're more, you are made up of so much more than your conscious sense. Once again, that's just one of your senses. You're not just your sense of touch. You're not just your sense of smell. You're not just your consciousness. There's way more to you than just that. So experiencing more of even just living and doing and going about everything kind of means being able to, focus that little pinhole once again in different spots, that spotlight of consciousness onto different things. And, weirdly enough, the goal of a lot of things like meditation is not necessarily to expand that pinhole. I don't know if that is even possible to like make the pinhole bigger of conscious, be aware of more things. I don't think our brain likes that quite as much, but certainly having some control over moving it around, changing our direction it's in, all of that type of stuff is quite valuable. And it is, a very complex idea, but we can call, learning to get more in touch with that, learning to trust it, could even be called learning to build confidence, or maybe learning to build talent in some ways. Maybe just having better control over where that pinhole is really where talent, where that idea of talent kind of comes from. So let's get into it. So, how can we interact with this trust of subconsciousness? How can we try to learn to trust our subconscious a little bit more, engage with it? It's tricky because once again, if you try to think our way into it too directly, it doesn't quite work out because that relies on your consciousness. You can't interact with your subconscious and through it's very complex and it will always make it a little bit of a difficulty. But I would suggest that we can make a lot of just process more more we can be a lot more productive in practicing our sense of trusting it and doing everything. Anyway, okay, now we're getting into it. Now 30 minutes in, now we'll be serious. Okay, let's do a quick test because you're often already in a pretty good flow state for certain parts of your just daily being for the most time. A lot of your bodily operations, things like that, you're in a flow state for. You are in the flow state. The flow state might not be the thing you're in for art at any given time, especially when you just go to quickly draw or something. But I guarantee you are in flow states at all times for different things. You might be familiar with the stress it might cause if I was to say something, and don't panic. If I was to say something like, let's all enter manual breathing mode. Your automatic breathing is now shut off, everyone. You can now only breathe manually through your control. You might start to feel a little, oh, am I breathing? Like a little bit of that feeling of like kind of, snapping. What I did was I snapped you out of your flow state. You were in a flow state for breathing. You were breathing very naturally without thinking about it, without doing anything. You were just breathing. You were making it happen. But the second I said that, you might have been like, oh, I'm conscious of it. So now am I breathing? Am I not breathing? Am I suffocating right now? I don't know. But you can see how that can deal. That didn't make your breathing any easier, did it? It didn't feel like it suddenly being aware of it made it, like easier. It's not more efficient now that you're manually thinking about breathing in and out. So, is that aspect, did going out of that flow state make your breathing any more productive or anything? And obviously, no, it did not. Now, the reason I bring this up is because this is how a lot of us approach drawing. We're basically drawing in that state that, of manual breathing. We're stressed out about it. We're putting too much concentration on it. We're hyper analyzing it. We're aware of everything we're doing. When you see people talk about flow states and things like that, that just means they're getting into the point where, like your breathing was in probably earlier, where it's just not something you need to think as much about. You can put a little bit less effort into it. But that's, one of these great comparisons that I can draw, because so much of our time we spend drawing, we do it in that manual breathing mode. And man, that's not, it doesn't feel good, does it? It feels a little stressful. It feels a little difficult. You can find a way to make even that act, that thing you do, a little bit more, controlled, a little bit trusting of your subconscious. So please try to not hyperfixate on your breathing. Try to find your way back into a natural flow state with your breathing if you haven't already. Some people are more susceptible to the idea of being tricked into focusing on it. But yeah, hyperfixation is a stressful thing. It's difficult. So we want to try to get more and more aspects of our life, of things we're doing. Trust your deeper subconscious. Let it handle it. You can just come in and be the little art director being like, yeah, I kind of want to go in that direction. I don't want to do this. And just kind of trusting yourself to draw a little bit more in that direction. I don't know why I keep scrolling like up and down a little bit. I keep losing my spot because I'm like fidgeting around. But yeah, that flow state that you're in while breathing, it's so close. What you're naturally feeling when you're breathing without me saying anything, that's what all of these professional artists are doing every time you watch them draw. You might notice there's a level of just like, they're not stressed. They're just kind of rhythmically doing it. Go, watch any of them just kind of draw something. Maybe you get them to draw in your sketchbook or something. You'll notice that there is a level of just like, it's whatever. And I'm just gonna, they can even have conversations while they're doing it. They can focus on other stuff. They can do all that stuff. They have a little bit more trust in their subconscious. Most of them just got it through mileage. And once again, you'll get it through mileage regardless. But, let's try to see what we can do to speed up that process and make it a little more actively practiced. Because once again, I find these topics fascinating. It's just super interesting. And in my quest, in my art journey of doing everything and looking under all those stones, earlier this year, actually, it's just been 1 year for me. I'm just new to it, but this year specifically, I decided to start experimenting around with meditation, just as a thing to do. I don't know, just quick show of hands, how many of you like do some meditation or practice it in some way? Okay, yeah, a little bit, maybe like 50-50, dabbling around. But I'm happy to report that I think there is a lot of value to be gained from it that you can relate and pull into your art journey, your art stuff. So great. I'm very happy about that, because now I'm kind of, once I got into it, I'm realizing like, oh, there's so many puzzles in this meditative world that kind of relate to all this art stuff that I've been really into. So, once again, some of you might have your own experiences with meditation. Some of you might not. That's fine. I originally found the concept to be kind of annoying or stressful in theory, because the only thing I knew about meditation was Zen-like meditation. That idea of like empty brain, I'm no thoughts, trying to get rid of everything. I found that extremely stressful. I found it difficult. I found it not helpful for me at all. It was, I honestly had I did a Zen-like meditation at the Buddhist temple over in Roland Heights one time. And I had almost a full-on panic attack, because it was so, my brain was just like, it was just in circles. It was in some chaos. But luckily this year was the year I learned about mindful meditation, which some of you hopefully know about. Mindful meditation is kind of going in a different direction. You're not trying to reach a point of Zen, emptiness, or anything like that. Instead, what you're just trying to do is openly embrace everything that appears in your consciousness. And I found that so much more fulfilling, so just positive, so interesting. And it's made my life a bit better. And I'm hoping maybe I can share a little bit of why with you guys. So if you indulge me, I know it's a little weird. We're in a group of strangers, but if you would be so kind as to indulge me, I would like to try a little bit of guided meditation. Not something I've done before, but I would like to give it a go. Just, give it a little bit of a try. So before we get started, just make sure you're comfortable, try to find feel like you're in just a comfortable seated place, you're not like in pain or anything too much, you might be a little bit sore or anything, but at least, feel like you're relatively comfortable. And you can close your eyes. I know it's weird. It's weird to lose that control over your surrounding environment, but you'll get a lot more out of it. Obviously, you don't have to. If you feel really uncomfortable with your eyes closed, that's fine. But, you'll get the most out of this if you close your eyes. Okay, so with your eyes closed, I just want you to first just take a few deliberate, controlled breaths. At whatever rate you want, just kind of, slow it down a little bit. Just, take a couple good, solid inhales, a couple good, solid exhales. Just, come down a little bit. Just get into that slightly more relaxed state. I don't have like the perfect radio voice for doing guided meditation. I'm sorry about that, but just bear with me. Okay, so, let's really make sure we're in our breath, make sure we're kind of slowing it down a little bit. And now what we can think about a little bit, I want you to think about that breath. I want you to take that pinhole, that spotlight that we were talking about, and shine that spotlight right onto your breathing, the physical act of breathing. Try to feel like you're just noticing the sensation of breathing, whether that be in your throat as the air passes through, maybe it's in your chest as it expands, contracts, maybe it's in your mouth, maybe it's in your nose, wherever the air, the pressure is touching. But wherever it feels strongly, just kind of try to focus that spotlight, shine that light a little bit on there, that physical act of breathing. Now, you're still going to be, obviously, you have a lot of senses going on. You're still going to be hearing me. You're going to be hearing things. You're going to be hearing the buzz of, the fans, everything like that. And that's fine. This is not you don't have to feel bad. There's nothing wrong with, just experiencing things, experiencing thoughts, getting distracted, doing any of that stuff. But, you can always come back to that little spotlight and try to keep controlling it. Try to, control it a little bit. And, let's try shifting it a little bit. Thinking about your breath. But now let's think about something else. Let's move that spotlight down and try to notice these sensations of just having a body, being in space, sitting in a chair, standing up if you're in the back, but just that feeling of taking up space. There's a lot of feelings that go into it. Maybe it's, pains from some old injury. Maybe there's tingling. Maybe there's, just feelings of temperature, feelings of weight, all of that stuff. You might be sore from walking around at this convention and, doing all that stuff. That's okay. You're not trying to ignore those feelings. I want you to just be welcoming, just open up to them, just acknowledge them, observe them. Observe whatever, comes up as you're just kind of enjoying that wider sense of your nervous system. And now we can try to focus a little bit more on our hands. So try to shine that spotlight directly on the feeling of your hands. A little bit of tingling, maybe in your fingers, maybe on one side. Maybe you can kind of feel the nerves kind of, just as subtle, dull tingling. Maybe it's more direct. Maybe you feel a little bit of some pain, maybe you have some carpal tunnel, maybe you got some different sorenesses, maybe it's just temperature. It could be anything, but I just want you to try to kind of focus on it. Try to shine that spotlight on your hands a little bit. Now, it might be worth taking a moment while you're doing this to realize that these sensations, everything you're feeling as you focus on something, that is not something that only started when you focused on it. That is always present. That exists in your subconscious at all times. Every sensation you might, focus in on, it's not like you were not, those sensations didn't exist. Now you're just taking a moment to actively, bring them into attention. In the same way you're doing that, you can think about your eyesight, because you've closed your eyes, but your eyesight technically hasn't gone anywhere. Your field of vision still exists. Your eyes didn't turn off. They didn't stop operating the second you closed your eyes. Your brain has gotten very good of basically making that feel unimportant, making it feel like just, subconsciously not important. My eyes closed. Don't worry about my field of vision. But that field of vision is still very much 100% present. It is there. It is, inside your consciousness. It is inside your awareness. You are looking into the back of your eyelids. But notice how relaxed it might feel for your sense of vision to have your eyes closed. It's a lot less stressful. There's, this strain of, maybe different lights and things. It kind of fades away. You're a little less concentrated on it. But you also might notice, little bits of glimmers of light, glimmers of movement in your field of vision. And that's, that's perfectly okay. You can enjoy all of that, observe things, the subtle movements of light and color that appear in that space. But yeah, once again, your brain has done a pretty good job deprioritizing that sense of vision just by simply closing your eyes. But it is there, just like everything. All those feelings in your hand, or the feelings in your feet, the feelings in your breath, which you might have now gone past and not even thinking about them. But they're all still there. All of that still exists. It might just be in your subconscious now, but it's still in there. So personally, I always enjoy this exercise of just shifting the pinhole of consciousness between different sensations, between different places in the body, between your breathing, between your field of view, between your hands. You might have experienced, obviously, we all are artists. We've experienced sitting in front of screens and staring at them and letting our eyes just kind of get more and more strained by focusing on a very set distance, a set place in space. Your consciousness is can get like that at times. It can get a little bit singularly focused at a specific kind of state of focusing at not to call it a distance, but something akin to a distance. You might notice just by doing this simple act of just kind of moving that spotlight around from your, different things, from your hand to your breathing to your field of view. What that's doing is it's basically giving you a little bit of an exercise, a little bit of a, look away from the screen, focus on different things. And when you come away from that, you might notice it's like giving a little bubble bath to your consciousness. It feels a little refreshed. You're no longer staring at the same distance. You're no longer focused at that computer screen of your consciousness, however it might be. But by practicing actively, kind of going to different places, it tends to give you a much more kind of relaxed feeling as you come back to different states of consciousness. And I find that very important. The same way you should be looking away from your monitor, from time to time. You can do this as a practice. If your consciousness is getting too densely, just kind of strained in one direction, maybe it just can't stop focusing on your thoughts. Do a little bit of this. Let yourself focus around. Let your consciousness get a little tiny workout. It'll usually feel nice. It'll usually feel refreshing. But moving on from that, and let's keep our eyes closed for another moment. And think about another sense, the sense of sound. That's a big one. You haven't escaped it. You've been hearing me the whole time. You've been hearing everything the whole time. You have no real control over it. It is a sense that basically you don't know what's going to happen next. Sounds happen. Someone might, an airplane might fly overhead. Someone might stomp their feet somewhere. You don't know exactly when my voice will come back, what I'll say next. There is a lot happening just with these sounds happening in your consciousness. So there's a lot of random noises, a lot of buzzing, a lot of shifting, a lot of movements happening like that. I want you to take a little bit of a note of just how good your subconscious is at determining where sounds are coming from and kind of what they are even. Because when you think about it, you have to remember that these things, these sound waves, and wow, they're just waves of pressure, they're only being picked up in your ears and they're only being understood in your consciousness. So this vast space of just waves of, vibrations of different pressure, how crazy is it that your subconscious is able to determine directionality, even though it's originating just from your ears, just in your subconscious? Yet it's doing so many complex calculations of memories, of what fans sound like, of what different things sound like, all these memories, what something sounds like when it's in front of you, what it sounds like when it's in back of you. You don't have to think about this stuff, but your subconscious is doing all this. It's giving you all these calculations. It's bringing you to such a clear understanding of everything going on. And the reason I bring that up is because I want you to realize how strong your subconscious is, how much it's capable of. People are worried about AI art and all these other topics. Your subconscious is ridiculously powerful. It has strengths that are just wildly beyond the scope of our imagination. It's taking information. It feels like you have a body. I mean, think about that. It feels like you have a body. You're very much convinced you have a body. Do you know it to be a certainty? Because it only exists inside your consciousness to some level. But there's so much going on to determine all this stuff, the sounds you're in, everything. So once again, I'm only bringing up the topic of sound just to, point out that your subconscious is amazing in that it can take all this chaoticness, this unpredictability, and just kind of interpret it into something that doesn't startle you every time you hear me talk. And maybe every time you hear something, you can get startled, but it doesn't feel horribly uncomfortable. And it gives you so much knowledge of everything. The world is full of sounds. And I'm using this to transition into the idea of thoughts, because thoughts are obviously the biggest thing that we struggle with. Thinking, getting our brain lost in thoughts. Thoughts are very much the same as sound. There's no difference in terms of they appear without your control. You don't really know them. And then sometimes, the sheer act of them appearing might be startling. It might feel a little uncomfortable. It might, just make you become lost in the memory of that sound happening and maybe fearful of this next sound that might happen. Your thoughts are very, very akin to sounds and just the sounds of the world. So the same way you maybe can practice to just accept the sounds that come into your consciousness, you can make it a goal to try to, accept the thoughts that appear in your consciousness as well. And, treat them like sounds. You hear them, you observe them, and they can go. They can move on. You don't have to be afraid of them. You don't want to wind up, like a little tiny chihuahua that hears one sound and is paralyzed with the fear of what the next sound might be, what that sound was, and everything like that. They get obsessed with it. It becomes a thing. We do that for our thoughts a lot of the times. We're that chihuahua. Anytime we feel anxiety, anytime we feel those emotions that are happening, it can paralyze us. It can make us very, distracted, very uncomfortable. But yeah, you can also work on coming to peace with the fact that, those sounds can just be observed. You can just take note of them and let them pass by. Take note of how quickly they disappear. You won't even remember the thoughts that you heard a moment ago. In many cases, they'll just be gone. And certainly by the time you stop, actively trying to pull at them, You'll forget they even existed. So personally, I like to think of consciousness kind of like floating in the middle of the ocean. And that ocean represents the vastness of your subconscious because, once again, it's ridiculously powerful. It's quite fast. And every very slight wave on the surface that you're floating on represents the actual thoughts that you're, observing. And as those waves kind of come into you and they kind of move your body and they jostle you around a little bit, it's important to just kind of, not let them, startle you too much, except that you will feel little waves here and there. You will feel things, but just maintain some relaxed sense of floating. Make it feel like you can float on that. Enjoy observing things because they will happen fast. And if you start thrashing around and you start getting startled by everyone, it's not going to make things any better. It'll just make everything a lot more difficult. Okay, so let's if you open your eyes, let's go back into slight meditation for a moment, because I think it'll be a little bit useful. Okay, so let's kind of dull things down. Let's think a little bit back to our breathing. Go back to the spotlight on the breath for a moment. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and okay, that was an experiment. I wanted to see. I wanted you to take note of how much you might have felt a little bit uncomfortable by the lack of predictability of the world around you. Were you okay with that? Were you okay with me starting a sentence and then cutting it off? Or did you feel instantly like a bunch of thoughts just crushed you in your brain? Did he die? Is he dead right now? What has happened? Are people playing a trick on me right now? That is, once again, that is very similar. You were floating on that big sea, and suddenly something unpredictable happened, and you might have, started thrashing around a little bit. But it probably wasn't super enjoyable, and it certainly highlights some different things. It highlights the core principle of aesthetics, honestly, that we like order. We don't like to lose control. We don't like to not feel some sense of control. We like to feel all of that stuff. Okay, one last thing to close your eyes to. I have one last thing to mention while the eyes are closed. So let's go back to the sounds around you. You know what? Never mind. We're running out of time. I'm going to move on. We're going to move on from that. But I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just noticed it's 5, so I'm going to try to speed through the stuff that is a little slower. I knew I wouldn't plan my time well. I'm so sorry. Okay. But anyway, you can go ahead and open your eyes if you haven't already. Let's get back to our regular sense of just, consciousness, our regular everyday place. And maybe you'll feel a little bit more relaxed. That might have, helped you get into a slightly different space of mind and everything, hopefully. I'm sorry, it's 5 o'clock and they're probably going to kick me out soon. But, at the very least, that meditative stuff might have, once again, I really do feel like it's a nice little bubble bath for your brain. You can kind of enjoy experiencing all of that stuff and moving around and kind of getting a better sense of that spotlight and kind of acknowledging that thoughts are very much like sounds. You don't have to control them, and the idea of trying to control them will, it'll just turn you into the chihuahua who doesn't like uncontrolled sounds. So think about that a little bit. Because when you're drawing, there's definitely a big value in practicing this exercise. Because when you're drawing, maybe you can experiment around with seeing if you can kind of shift that spotlight around even while drawing, which is difficult, I know, but that's where things like automatic drawing come in. If you don't know what automatic drawing is, it's basically like doodling, messing around on a page. But there is a big value in it in that it lets you engage with maybe, potentially, even just a small sliver or fraction of that deep, deep ocean of subconscious knowledge that we all have. So, I want you to keep, kind of trying to practice that and engaging with that where you can. if you've been in any of my classes, brainstorm or whatever, you probably know that I like to bring up the idea of juggling a lot. I compare art to juggling in so many ways because, once again, design theories are vast. There's so many things. There's, just hierarchies of stuff. There's different concepts. You got to worry about tension. You got to worry about ratios of everything. It's a lot. So what you can do anytime you're drawing is think of it like, I just want to get better at juggling these concepts. I just want to get better at trusting that, maybe it's just tangents. Maybe I'm just hyper aware of tangents and maybe I can get to a point though, where at least I can toss that ball of tangents up and know I'm going to catch it, and that I can just confidently know that I'm gonna observe the tangents and I can avoid them because I'm kind of aware of them. I can trust my subconscious to make me aware that they're going to happen before I even see them happen. And just engaging with that a little bit, trying to get into that, that juggler state of mind, because art is, it's a lot to juggle. It's a lot. You're basically, when you see amazing people doing art, they are masters of just juggling. They are juggling everything that's going on with design theory and with everything. And they're being able to then pull things out of subconscious, and engage with it in a different way. Now, originally I said this talk was going to have 2 parts. Apparently, I only finished the first part, which sucks because I kind of wanted to really talk about the next part. But I'll give you the quickest 1 minute. I know it's past 5. I'll give you the quickest 1 minute summary. In that mental frameworks are, they're so valuable. They're so important. They're everything. If you're depressed, you can't picture a world that is not depressed. You can't think of your memories that are not depressed. You can't think of anything other than the framework of depression. It's a lens you see everything through. When you're stressed, you see everything through that lens. When you're happy, you see everything through that lens. It can be very difficult for us to view our own art and own art journey with good positivity. But luckily, even though it might be extremely difficult for us to just, find positivity in our own artwork, in our own art journey, what you can do, knowing that the framework will let you kind of adjust how you see everything, what you can do is you can actively try to be a little bit more positive towards someone else's art journey, towards someone else's artwork. We can't do it now because there's not enough time, but originally we're going to have a little meditative thing as well. But I'll give you something you can practice anytime you have some time. Go into your relaxed, more meditative state and just think about someone who you have very non-complicated, emotions toward, just an artist you like, just any artist that you saw at Lightbox that seemed friendly, that's doing, stuff that seems like a fun person, whatever. And just think about them, even though you don't know them very well, and just think, I hope they have a great art journey. I hope they meet all their goals. I hope they make art that makes them happy. I hope they're smiling right now. I hope they're just full of life, full of happiness, and really think about that. Really want it. Really want someone else to be successful, to be happy, to enjoy their art journey, to feel at peace with the art they make, and all of that stuff. If you can kind of meditate on that quality just a little bit of projecting just even a fraction of that positivity, thinking about, their smile, it might make you happy. Just thinking about someone smiling makes you happy. It feels good. It might bring a smile to your face. But what you're doing is you're changing the framework that your brain is in. So coming out of that, then when you go to do your own work and look at your own work, you probably won't be quite as negative if you really, really were engaging with that. And I don't want it to be like a passive thing, like their art's good, but mine sucks. No, because then you're still like making it, you're trying to do too much. If you can really just get into a space of, no, I just want them to be happy. I want them to be just full of joy every time they do their art and everything like that. And just meditate on that person. Think about that person. See them smiling in your brain. I guarantee you will feel better about your own art just by virtue of getting to see your own art, even if it's just for a moment, through that framework, that happier state of, just conscious thought and everything. So when you're, even if you're just online looking at art, give hearts, give likes to random people, say comments. Like if someone made something you like, just be like, you know what? I love what you're doing here. It's great. And it's making me happy. be that person. Be that person because it's beneficial to you to get into that, state of mind. So that's kind of that was the second part. So I streamlined through it, but yeah, I'll wrap it up. It's past 5. You got places to go. Just sorry, I'll streamline this in the future. But just thank you so much for coming to this talk. I hope it was fun. I hope it was kind of interesting. I guarantee you can find ways to make it your own. Pick out the little parts that I might have mentioned today, even if it's just a word from something, and just try to, recontextualize it, make it your own, figure it out, in your own time. And it can be a very positive experience. But yeah, thank you. Thank you all so much for coming to this. Normally I was like, oh, I'll probably finish all of this in 30 minutes and I'll just have question and answers. But regardless, I'll be around all weekend. If you see me, I'm not doing a booth thing. I'll just be wandering. But if you want to talk about anything, yeah, feel free to just reach out at any time. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your weekend as well. And hopefully you feel a little refreshed. Hopefully you feel like, I can go and do a little bit more positivity. All right.